you know, many people suggest that I should do the audio, and I said that I will do the audio when the book sells 1,000 copies. But because it's so powerful and there's so much that I want you to know, then I am reading a few excerpts. But of course, the book, when I do the audio, it's going to be at least 10 hours long. I averagely read a page of 300 words in 3 minutes, so I've got 100 words a minute. And so 670 times 3 divided by 60, whatever that turns out to be. I'll do the calculations later to let me know what I have waiting for me. And of course it will probably take double that time, because you know, you want a different inflection. I'm going to have to learn about you know, various skills of inflection to make the book, you know, read much more interesting, because it's an art, people. And I think I'm halfway there. I think I can give the appropriate inflection once I become fluid in the action and aware of what I'm delivering. But you see, due to the fluctuating dispositions of our soul, then different days will give a different personage to what is being read. And so people will probably say, is this a different person? You know how I am. You know, I fluctuate a great deal with my energies. And so I would have to be very mindful about that. But I've just got to read this part for you, and I've no idea how long I'm going to be reading for. It's going to be maybe 2.5 pages until the next subheading. But I've just read the first few lines and I thought, well, you know, here we go again. I've got to convey this. When spirit intervenes to save our souls. Now, I know that there's many people who are suffering that watch my videos. Over the years, many people who are suffering have been drawn to my videos in the hope of finding something which would give them some respite. And many people have wrote to me and told me that I have been very instrumental in helping them through difficult times. And so this particular subheading is speaking to you guys. So, when spirit intervenes to save our soul. Here I will speak somewhat accusingly towards God or spirit for their delayed actions. Now that we are awakened and our spirit has finally stepped up, set the ego aside and taken hold of the helm, we find ourselves set on a new course. The direction of this new course is by no means apparent to us at first. Still, it certainly feels better than our previous direction, because we are no longer burying ourselves alive in a constant deluge of Maya. While on this new course, everything seems brighter and hope has returned to our lives. As to where we are heading at that particular time, who cares? All we know is that it feels like a world apart from the hellish life we cursed before. From the hellish life we cursed, from the hellish life we cursed before our mental shift. How many of you are actually currently there? You haven't actually had the gift of spiritual awakening. You are still in the Maya, mostly self-imposed Maya, due to many unconscious machinations which you're not aware of. And this, of course, is the job of a psychoanalyst. But if you have been lucky enough to have the spontaneous awakening via your pain, then you'll know exactly what I'm speaking about. If you haven't been lucky enough, then maybe you've got something to look forward to. This mental shift has been of great interest to me throughout the years because it's a genuine phenomenon that God himself seemingly gifted to us to save our souls. It was a lifeline that was tossed to us right at the point of us drowning in our subjective suffering. I often ponder and wonder, was it really God who threw us a lifeline? Or was it our innate survival instinct that eventually stepped in? Whether it was the genius of our deep-rooted survival facility or the hand of God, it is still very curious to me why either one took so long before offering their hand. Why do we get left so long to suffer? I suffered for years. Many of you have suffered many years, longer than I did. And yet it seems you haven't been offered this lifeline. Why is it that whatever genius dwells within our body doesn't offer the lifeline to pull ourselves out of the mire? Why is it that the hand of God isn't offered to us in our deepest moments of suffering? When we're crying out for assistance, please, universe, God, anybody, you'd even take the hand of Satan himself. Because what you are suffering, you just cannot bear anymore. Why is it that it takes so long for us to get offered that lifeline? Whether it was the genius of our deep-rooted survival facility or the hand of God, it is still very curious to me why either one took so long before offering their hand. I see it like this. If we were thrown a lifeline long before our demise was imminent, that's to say, when we were simply within a tolerable level of depression, then our being saved wouldn't have half the profound effect upon us that it did when being rescued at the 11th hour, when we were almost certain that we were going to die a horrible death, or at the very least remain completely miserable for eternity. My quandary is this. The spiritual shift isn't renowned for making manifest until we are almost taking the proverbial last breath. It appears either that suicide has to be our next port of call, or we are resignedly destined for the rest of our lives to live in pain and anguish before our souls are begrudgingly saved by the higher being. So, if it was the human brain's survival mechanism stepping in to save the day, then why did it leave it so long? Surely our brilliant brain could see that our depression wasn't serving us in its present capacity and would thus subsequently free us from that curse much earlier, right? After all, we pride ourselves on being the most intelligent creature in the known universe, and yet we cannot very often save ourselves from the most mundane of mental illnesses. Our bodies have no problem at all in healing a multitude of physical illnesses, but fail miserably when it comes to the healing of our minds. The bizarre thing about most mental illnesses is that we ourselves bring them on by thinking non-productive thoughts over prolonged periods. You would have thought that those varieties of illnesses would be the easiest to resolve simply by applying reason to our issues. Just look at what the human mind is capable of. Man on the moon, rovers on Mars, open heart surgery, etc. And yet we can't very often talk ourselves out of what we have talked ourselves into through many years. If, on the other hand, it was the hand of God that saved us, then again, why did he leave it so long? Unless, of course, he wanted to gain something from helping us out of that heightened state of suffering. What is his objective here? This is where things get even more curious, because if it was God who helped us see the light just before we took our lives or sank into irretrievable depths of self-destruction, then for what reason? Solely to save us from death or prolonged suffering? Again, why leave it so long? Could leaving our salvation until the 11th hour serve God in any way? I ask this question because if he intervenes at the 11th hour, he has more potential to gain recruits. Look at it this way. If you're drowning and you're saved by a lifeguard long before your life flashes before your eyes and death is imminent, then the lifeguard wouldn't appear anything like the hero that he or she would if they got to you just as you finally gave up the struggle through exhaustion and slipped under the water. If that was the case, then you could easily be forgiven for falling in love with the lifeguard, or at the very least feel a great debt to your Saviour, right? I rest my case. God does indeed seem to have a vested interest in leaving us to suffer greatly at the hands of the proverbial devil before eventually intervening and becoming the all of your life. Becoming the hero. Let me read that again. God does indeed seem to have a vested interest in leaving us to suffer greatly at the hands of the proverbial devil before eventually intervening and becoming the hero. It's very akin to the notion of serves yourself right for sinning all of your life in the devil's realm of hedonism. Then God, almost reluctantly, just in the nick of time, steps in before Satan clasps complete ownership over our souls. Do we then feel we have a debt to God, just like we would to the lifeguard who saved our lives? We would likely We likely would. And then it's probable that we would become believers in some higher entity that we thought saved our souls. I ask a lot of questions, people, and I answer many of them in this book. What is actually going on here? Why do so many suffer? Why do people take their lives? Who has jurisdiction over this? Are people bereft of the power and energy of spirit which some of us have? That Satan, evil, death takes possession of those when it doesn't others. Either way, doubtless our spiritual awakening would have never come about if our Saviour hadn't been left till the 11th hour. Because human beings are vehemently stubborn beyond measure and highly reluctant to make significant changes in our lives. After all, we had been in the mire most likely for many years, and it wasn't looking imminent that we, of our own accord, would be saving ourselves any day soon from experiencing further depths of hell. So, a saviour of some sort would easily fit the bill. We know that the human mind works in this manner, otherwise we wouldn't have invented superheroes, the proverbial knights in shining armour, which manifest to save the day. When philosophizing about such phenomena, we are at liberty to lean either way for our answers. For example, if we shrug off what happened when we awakened as being nothing more than our internal survival mechanism finally kicking in, then at the very most, all we would likely to feel is a highly grateful. Let me start again. For example, if we shrug off what happened when we awakened as being nothing more than our internal survival mechanism finally kicking in, then at the very most, all we are likely to feel is highly grateful for this genius of the human mind for eventually giving us the well overdue life-saving help that was needed. If we never attributed our soul being saved due to any godly assistance, then we doubtless would simply continue our lives bereft of any spiritual connection or religious affiliation. But if, on the other hand, we consider that it was God's grace that was responsible, that's to say, the God of our choice, mainly depending on which culture we are born into, then maybe we would continue our lives as religious converts of some degree. We may claim that if it wasn't for God's intervention, we would surely have died. What I am suggesting here is that unless we genuinely feel that we have had a spiritual or religious experience, then the actions are simply that, options. The options are simply that, options. We get to choose depending on a myriad psychical persuasions or conditioning that have crafted our minds throughout our lives. As a further alternative, we might believe that our spirit or higher selves intervened to save our souls from destruction or death. It is the latter option I will now pursue, because it is far more interesting to me as a spiritually inclined person than someone who isn't religiously oriented and knows almost nothing about neurology. We can see then that my destiny had already been crafted. If I were a neurologist, then doubtless I will be heavily leaning towards the brain's incredible attributes for the answers to my experience. But as I'm not a neurologist, my choice gravitates towards another direction. Here's how my mind sees it. Intuitively, I have received a gift of something, a brand new perspective on life, that I, at least, wasn't aware I possessed before. Maybe I never had it before. Maybe I did possess it somewhere, but it was lying dormant, deep within the archives of my unconscious mind. Or maybe the gift of spirit was precisely that, a gift from an exterior source. This is an arena where I am still firmly amiss contemplating whether spirit has entered my body or whether it was always here and has now been awakened. Hence the term spiritual awakening. It is very difficult to know, but I can confidently say that now, since my awakening, I feel and think very differently than I did before my awakening, and it is that which I will now pursue, not the why things have changed, but how. The greatest asset that spirit affords us. Now, in that section, just to be clear, people, I'm asking the question, what agency is responsible for our spiritual awakening? How many people have come out of those depths of trauma and hell and not been spiritually awakened? How many people have just slipped out of being abjectly depressed for many years and not have spiritual inclinations or religious inclinations? I don't know of anybody. We all seem to awaken to spirit, to a God of some variety. And the question I was asking, why does God leave it so long? And the answer, I could tell you the answer. I'm not going to tell you the answer. Because you have to earn it, people. The answer is very powerful, very enlightening. But I can't divulge that to you now. You're not ready for it.